Hello again, gamers. Welcome back to the Board Game Captain. I'm the Captain, and today I'm going to be reviewing and talking about Things from the Flood. This is the sequel game to Tales from the Loop from Free League Publishing. Before we get started, I want to say I've got a whole bunch of links in the description down below for you to check out at your leisure. There's a link to BoardGameCaptain.com, a great hub for all things Board Game Captain. Joining is free. There's also a link to my Patreon if you're in a position to and would like to help out the channel. And there's a link to my Teespring store if you'd like to get some cool gamer gear, t-shirts, mugs, etc. Another great way to support the channel. Now, I want to start by saying big thank you to Free League Publishing for sending me this copy of Things from the Flood, as well as the copy of Tales from the Loop that I already reviewed. If you'd like to check that out, I'll put a link up here so you can check out the review I did to Tales from the Loop. Now, this is an interesting sort of product because this is a sequel to Tales from the Loop. So I want to read the back to you here. Somewhere out there beyond the cordons, beyond the fields and marshes, abandoned machines roam like stray dogs. They wandered about impatiently restless in the new wind sweeping through the country. They smelled something in the air, something unfamiliar. Welcome back to the world of the Loop. Things are different now. Simon Stålenhag's paintings of Swedish retro-futuristic suburbia populated by fantastic machines and strange creatures have won global acclaim. The award-winning Tales from the Loop role-playing game was released in 2017 and let you experience the amazing world firsthand. Now, you can return to the Loop in this standalone sequel game that continues the story into the 1990s. But remember, this time, you can die. So now, if you checked out my review of the Tales from the Loop role-playing game, you'll know that one of my biggest gripes was the fact that you could not die. So actually, right off the bat, this game addresses one of my biggest issues with the previous game. Now, what is this? This is kind of an interesting thing. It's very common in role-playing games to have expansion books that take on different areas of the world, different time periods, different ways of playing, new bad guys, new mechanics, etc. But it's a little rarer to have just a sequel game, and that's what this is, a sequel role-playing game. So basically, this moves the timeline from Tales from the Loop, which was set in the mid-'80s, into the mid-'90s. For Things from the Flood. In addition, your characters are older. So whereas Tales from the Loop, you would be a maximum of like 15 years old, I think minimum of 11 years old, this moves you forward to being minimum of 16 years old. So the next age after, you capped out at Tales from the Loop. And it's really meant to be played for high school age teenagers. I think it's 16 to 18 is the rough age range that is meant to be played with this game. So it is a sequel game. It has more adult themes. It has older player characters. It is grittier and darker. Let's get into it. I'm going to tell you what's in this book. I'm going to tell you, what I think of it. We're going to talk about how the game system works, etc. And I'm going to really focus in on what's different from the game system and the setting here versus, say, just Tales from the Loop. Why you should get this if you are a fan of Tales from the Loop, or maybe if there were issues you didn't like Tales from the Loop for, why you should buy this instead. So, all right. So first off, I want to draw attention to, of course, the people behind this game. Give credit where credit is due. Creator of the Loop universe is Simon Stålenhag, of course, who made the original art books that these games are based on. The lead game designer is Nils Hintz. The editor and project manager was Nils Carlin. The Year Zero game engine, which of course this is another implementation of, is Thomas Harenstam. Additional writing was by Rickard and Troya and Chris Ainsworth. The illustrations are by Simon Stålenhag and Rian Rosenberg. The graphic design and maps are by Christian Granath. The pre-press was by Dan Alekstrand. The translation was by Tim Persson. The proofreading was by John Maron and Costa Kostulis. And a special thanks to Therese Clarehead and Elizabeth Holin. Communications was by Bull Berman, and customer support by Jenny Bremberg. And then there's a bunch of playtesters listed. So the first chapter is life after the flood. So this helps, first off, getting you set up with what the stories are going to be like, how the game is going to play, basic concepts about rolling dice, principles of the game, how role playing is played, a general introduction to how to role play, how to play a role playing game, as well as specifically what things are like in the Swedish loop in the 90s. Then you get a more deep dive on the Swedish loop in the 90s in Chapter 2, which is the loop in a new time. So similar to the Tales from the Loop role-playing game, this includes things about the 90s, popular music, popular movies, little sidebars to get you in the mood of the time period, while also having lots of specific things that are different in this bizarre alternate world 1990s. Now remember, if you have or have not played Tales from the Loop, the big difference in this alternate world, this retrofuturistic world, is that the particle accelerators in the United States and Sweden led to massive advances in technology that they did not in our world, which included magnetrine flying ships that used the Earth's magnetic fields to be able to levitate, as well as advanced robotics and proper AI. So all of that comes forward into the 90s, but in the 90s, some new wrinkles are added because there are difficulties and problems that come about due to the unchecked scientific advancement without any kind of oversight. A lot of these advances have been done without any foresight as to what the dangers and risks might have been, and now some strange things have happened that are making some of these technologies become less reliable and less usable. And also in this chapter, there's the beginning of a lot of grotesque body horror type imagery, which again lends itself to illustrating how this game is really meant to be more of a adult themed game. This game is meant to deal with such themes as sex, drugs, and body horror, which leads me to one of my first big recommendations on this. I don't recommend you play this game with multiple generations of your family, of the same family in the role-playing group, because of the fact that this game will deal with such themes as sex, drugs, and body horror. It could become a little awkward if you were to play this with your kids and or parents. So I would recommend instead sticking to friend groups for this one. So that moving on. It continues on with a full exploration of all the things going on in the Swedish loop before moving on to Chapter 3, the Hoover Dam Disaster, where it goes over what's going on in the U.S. Because again, just like Tales from the Loop, you have a second possible setting, which is the Hoover Dam setting by Boulder, Nevada. And this is for, of course, people who would prefer to play in the United States if they are not as familiar with what, say, Sweden was like in the 1990s. Maybe because they're from the U.S. or they're more familiar with what the U.S. was like due to the fact that there were a lot of popular 1990s movies made in the United States that were seen worldwide. People are generally more familiar with what culture and society was like in the United States during that time period. The next chapter is the teen, and that is where we get to make our characters. So similar to Tales from the Loop, you've got a whole bunch of types to choose from. Again, types are basically what these game systems use instead of character classes, and the types are recommended that you don't double up on any types. You have different characters for different character types for each player, and the character types can be thought of as the sort of things you would see archetypal type characters in groups of friends in 80s and 90s movies. I had said when doing the Tales from the Loop review, and it goes doubly true for this one, that you can think of the different characters in The Breakfast Club because they really do illustrate what the different types are like. So the types we have are hacker, jock, lone wolf, motorhead, party animal, raver, rocker, seeker, snob, street kid. Now, the obviously the types have changed a bit because your characters are older, and two, you move the time period forward. And even though they had incredibly advanced technology like robots and such in the Tales from the Loop, they did not have technologies that like the internet, which in our world did not show up into the 1990s. Again, in this, now the internet is becoming a thing, so you actually have a character class for hacker, which was not available, say, in Tales from the Loop. They had some similar things. They had people who could do programming and such, but there was no internet, even though they had fully advanced artificial intelligence. So after you pick your type, you have, of course, picking your age and your attributes. Now, unlike Tales from the Loop, the age does not have a direct effect on your attributes. Your attributes are the same regardless of your age. And for your age, you're supposed to be between 14 and 19 years old. So that's a little correction from what I was saying before. I was a little off on that. So anywhere between 14 and 19 years old. But still, basically, you're supposed to be like high school to maybe just out of high school age. Then it goes over, now for your attributes, your attributes can be between 1 and 5. And to start off the game, you have 14 points to spread between your various attributes, which are body, tech, heart, and mind. Now, similar to the other Year Zero engines, your attribute is combined with a particular appropriate skill in order to do any roles and possibly equipment as well. And for your skills, to start with, your skills can be between 0 and 5 total throughout the game. But to start with, you can have a maximum of 3 points in any particular skill if it is a key skill for your type or class, and you can only have 1 point in skills that are not key skills for your type, though you can gain levels in them through experience, through play. So the skills, of course, are grouped based on the attribute. So the body skills are sneak, force, and move. The tech skills are tinker, program, and calculate. The heart skills are contact, charm, and lead. And the mind skills are investigate, comprehend, and empathize. So then it goes into how to use items and also getting an iconic item, which is the same as it was in Tales from the Loop. So items can give you 1 to 3 extra dice towards a particular task if it is appropriate, whereas an iconic item, which is an item you can hold on to from game to game, it is not something you just pick up and lose for a single game. Iconic items always give you 2 dice. Then it also talks about your drive, which is very similar to how it was in Tales from the Loop, and your shame. So they've done away with your pride and instead have replaced it with a shame, which is an interesting transition from being a kid to being a teenager, because teenage years are racked with self-doubt and shame. But your shame is used much in the same way. You use your shame to auto-succeed once per game at something that is very appropriate for your particular shame that you pick for your character. Then again, it goes over relationships and hooks and anchors, all the kind of things you use to fully flesh out how your character relates to NPCs and the other player characters. And then we go into conditions. Now, here's another place where it differs a bit from Tales from the Loop. So again, you've got the same 4 basic conditions: upset, scared, exhausted, injured, as you did in Tales from the Loop. And you have the same major condition of broken, where once you get all of those conditions, you become broken. And you will, if you get any of the minor conditions, you get a -1 to all your rolls. Cumulative, if you get multiple of those minor conditions, if you become broken, either a mind or body, you will auto-fail all those rolls. Except, here's where it changes. Scars. Scars is the new mechanic in here. I briefly talked about it when I was talking about Tales from the Loop, but the gist is this. With scars, if you become broken, you will gain a scar. And the scar, the way it works is you have that scar until you find a way to deal with it in a game. When you deal with it, you will have the chance to once per scar, overcome a check automatically like you would with your shame. However, it's only once, and then you overcome it, and you talk about how you can erase that scar. Until you overcome it, though, it becomes a very key element to help with role playing, because especially if the scar is a mental or emotional one, it could be something that might help you flesh out your character and help you deal with certain situations in a believable way, make your character very three-dimensional. Once you deal with it, you can erase that scar. But while you have that scar, if you get more scars, because you can pick up multiple scars in one game, of course, after you have 2 scars or more, you have to roll a die. And if you roll equal to or greater than your number of scars, you're going to be okay. But if you roll less than your number of scars, your character's going to die, either immediately or later in this game. You guys can discuss it as a group on how you want to deal with it, how you're going to want that character to die. But this game is actually meant to deal with death trauma and actually role play it out and figure out how it's going to go. It makes it much more realistic and much more believable. And because you can discuss it, you can have the character die later from their injuries, unless it's something they really should die from, like right now, 100%. And then maybe you could give that character an NPC, that player, to give them an NPC to play for the rest of the game or something like that. They can turn that NPC into a player character for the rest of the game, so they're not sitting around twiddling their thumbs. But their character could die, and then you'll have to role play out and explore how that affects the other player characters. And of course, the next game, that player will have to have a new character that they will have to join the group. They also have a very similar experience system that they do in Tales from the Loop, where at the end of every game, there's a bunch of questions you ask, and every question you get to answer yes to, you gain an experience point up to a possible 5, and every 5 experience points can be used to increase one of your skills. This game, different from Tales from the Loop, also deals a lot with frictions between the different player characters. As they're becoming teenagers, rivalries really show up, as well as attempting to win each other's affections. When you're a teenager, sex is always on your mind. So this game actually deals with that, which is, again, one of those areas where I feel that playing with multiple generations of a single family, unless you guys are very open in talking about such things, might be a little awkward. So I would, again, reiterating here, but I would recommend playing this with a friend group, not with family group with multiple generations of the same family. Usually siblings are more open and able to talk about such things versus, say, kids and their parents. But again, that, your mileage may vary. If you live in a family that is very open with talking about such things, that might be okay with you. Now, Chapter 5 is the Trouble. Trouble is where it talks about exactly how the mechanics of overcoming the trouble works, which works just about the same as it did in Tales from the Loop. It is a streamlined version of the Year Zero engine, whereby when you have something you need to overcome, you find the appropriate attribute and the appropriate skill, add those numbers together, that's how many dice you're going to get to roll, plus possibly, if you have equipment, you can add those dice in. 6s are what you need for a success. A normal difficulty is you need 1 6. Extremely difficult things need 2 6s, and almost impossible things need 3 6s. Those are ludicrously difficult things. Though one of the examples they gave in one of these books was jumping off a bridge onto a moving vehicle, which you would need 3 6s for. Now, though, because of the fact that they add in, the scars in this, there is also more danger involved. So similar to the implementation in Tales from the Loop, if you fail and you push your roll, you have a chance to get a negative condition. In dangerous situations, somewhat dangerous situations, just trying to succeed, you will automatically get a negative condition, and pushing your roll, you might get an additional one. That's all similar to Tales from the Loop, but also in here, it specifically notes that when dealing with incredibly dangerous situations, for instance, someone pulls a gun on you and you're trying to grab their hand and keep them from shooting you, if you fail and fail the pushing your luck and rolling again, you may immediately become broken and possibly die. And that's because a gunshot should be super dangerous. And I appreciate the greater realism in this, in how that works. So I really am all for these changes for this sequel to Tales from the Loop, for Things from the Flood. I am all for it. Then it goes over how to do teen versus teen actions and how you can take extra, when doing such things, you can take extra conditions to get extra successes in competing against other players. It fully goes over what you can use all of the skills for, what sort of roles you can use them to overcome. It has lots of examples, which is something I really like from Free Leagues games. They always give lots of examples of actual role play to give you an idea of how these would actually work in action. And the examples are always done like a script. You'll have the game master and a player and another player, and they'll be discussing things that they're doing. And that's always great. I really appreciate that. The next chapter is chapter 6, the mystery. So the mystery is how to build and structure a mystery as the game master. This gives you, again, very similar to the chapter that was in Tales from the Loop, a wonderful breakdown as a game master of how to make a mystery using this game system. Because again, these game systems are very much meant to be mysteries. They're not meant to be combat oriented. An entire combat in this game system is dealt with a single roll. There are bigger troubles, bigger problems that you can deal with that will need multiple rolls. But those bigger, more complex problems are never just like a fight with someone. It's usually something big and difficult and stressful that would require the whole group to cooperate. Some players doing one thing, some players doing another thing, in which case they'll have a bunch of successes you need. Everybody talks about what they're doing to overcome this complex problem, and they do lots of rolls and lots of pushing their luck and lots of getting extra conditions just to get successes. And these are things that can be really very much the climax of a game. But yeah, so this chapter is great. It's very well done. It very properly breaks down how to structure a game in this system. And as usual, the artwork to illustrate all of their points is fantastic. Now, the next chapter is the mystery landscape. Just like it was in Tales from the Loop, there is the option for a mystery landscape in Things from the Flood. And just like in Tales from the Loop, the mystery landscape gives you a bunch of various hooks, possible storyline ideas, and NPCs spread throughout the loop, both in the United States and in Sweden, because they could be in either area. And basically, you could use it to do a sandbox game. As your characters go around and try to solve a particular mystery they're working on, you throw lots of hooks at them. And those hooks could all turn into other games. And they'll decide which ones they want to investigate, which ones they want to address. And it's a very functional way that you could play this. It would work very well. And I really, really like the mystery landscape in Things from the Flood. In fact, I like it better than the mystery landscape in Tales from the Loop. I think a lot of the hooks are even more interesting, and I really like how they interconnect. And I like how they interconnect with the Prophets of Pandora. Chapter 8 is the Prophets of Pandora, which leads you into the campaign that is in the back of the book. This book is done almost exactly in the same format that Tales from the Loop was. So just like Tales from the Loop, Chapter 8 is an introduction to the 4-game campaign in the back of the book, and the next 4 chapters are the adventures that are for that campaign. So Prophets of Pandora is the campaign. I'm not going to ruin any of it for you here, but needless to say, it's full of lots of interesting NPCs, lots of really cool storylines, and lots of very interesting things happen. And there are 4 full games that could be done either in Sweden or in Nevada for this campaign. Great storyline arcs. Really like these games a lot. And that's it. I mean, those 4 games could play as a full-on campaign. Some of those games are long enough that they definitely could and probably will take multiple actual game sessions to play through. I think the last one in particular is probably about 3 games worth of play. So I would say that this game is complete with its campaign, and it feels like a bigger campaign than was in the Tales from the Loop because there's so much in there. You could play that all out, and that could be months worth of gaming, which is fantastic. Really, really great stuff. All right, so negatives. I'm a little hard-pressed to find negatives with this one. I think the only things I had problems with in Tales from the Loop have totally been fixed in Things from the Flood. My one big negative is... the Flood. What is the Flood? The Flood is basically both of the loops get flooded out by some strange murky water that is rumored to have come through a portal that the scientists opened to another world or another dimension. And afterwards, strange things start coming out of the quarantine zone around the loop, like you see there with the picture on the cover. Now, My only real gripe is that these creatures here don't actually show up. There is one creature, not multiples, but one creature that's kind of similar to these, but I really wish that these had showed up in one of the games at the adventure in the back. This is a minor gripe, because you yourself could change the adventure or write your own adventure to have these creatures show up. It's not difficult to do so, especially because based on the storyline in here that I'm not going to ruin, you can understand what these creatures are meant to represent, what they are. So yeah, that's really the only downside I have for this. Positives, I love the system for taking wounds and scars and possibly dying. I think it adds a real needed risk and threat and urgency and tension for the characters that was not in the system for Tales from the Loop. As much as I liked Tales from the Loop, that was my one big gripe about the rule system, which, like I said when I did the review there, I would not actually use that whole part of the system where it says your players can't die, because I think you need to have that risk. But they've done away with that in Things from the Flood, and Things from the Flood is awesome. Now, you do not need to have Tales from the Loop to play Things from the Flood. The full rules are in here, and it doesn't rely on anything from Tales from the Loop to have this. So if you didn't like some of the things in Tales from the Loop because you didn't like playing as little kids, because you didn't like that you couldn't die, things like that, but this grittier 90s body horror, sex, drugs, and horror movies setting appeals to you, you could totally get this and not, and be fine, even though you never played, never got Tales from the Loop. This is completely standalone, which is also something I really like. I think it's great because the two games, while they can appeal to some of the same people, like me, both games very much appeal to me, there are enough differences that some people will find one of these settings appealing and not the other. And that's the other thing that's really great. Yeah, so I absolutely adore this. I think this game is fantastic. I like it even better than Tales from the Loop. I think that this everything that's been changed in the system has been an upgrade and is done right. I think the mystery landscape in this is even better than the mystery landscape in Tales from the Loop. I love the body horror elements. It really feels like they took a lot of inspiration from 80s and 90s gruesome horror movies, which there were a lot, and I love that they did that. And I love the retro nostalgic 90s setting without beating you over the head with it, because there's lots of references in here to things that very much would remind you of 90s movies and comic books and TV shows, but they don't really like beat you over the head with it, like say how Stranger Things has been doing in their later seasons. As much as I love Stranger Things, don't get me wrong, they do beat you over the head with the 80s references. And in both Tales from the Loop and Things from the Flood, they don't really do that. It's more subtle. It's more in the background. It's more natural. It's more like you are actually characters living in that time period versus, characters looking back through rose-colored glasses. So yeah, I absolutely adore this game. I love the setting and I love the rules. So let me know what you think down below if you've checked out Tales from the Loop and Things from the Flood. What do you think about the comparison between the two of them? Feel free to comment down below if you think there's anything I should have talked about that I missed when talking about Things from the Flood or how it relates to Tales from the Loop. And if you enjoyed this review of a role-playing game and you'd like to see me do more like it, be sure to give this video a like, share it on all forms of social media, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Board Game Captain. That's Captain spelled with a K on YouTube. And until next time, game on.